Tie it over here now before we plug it in, so we'll pull it back.
Yeah, shoot. How long are we to wait on sound then?
Are you ready now?
I'm ready.
Charles?
Light's ready.
All right, turn over. Action. No, it's not far enough. That was it, yeah. Introduce again. Cut.
You're at 4, right?
Yeah.
Okay, take a couple steps further down.
Don't bump that white thing. So
Right there.
Okay.
Now she's really had a terrible fright down below. All right, turn over. Action. Cut. How was that?
That was good.
Above all, I think Michael Powell is important because he is a unique vision and sensibility in world cinema. His films have been about fantasy, dream, artificiality, imagination. They're extraordinary concoctions of color, music, dance sometimes. He's a man who always defied the realist tradition in British cinema and believed in filming the imagination. His experience as a filmmaker gathered in the 30s, the 40s and the 50s is really a history of studio filmmaking, of building sets and creating a world on sound stages. The films of the 1940s, the films that represent his most fruitful period, beginning with Thief of Baghdad, 49th Parallel, Colonel Blimp, Matter of Life and Death, I Know Where I'm Going, The Small Back Room, and I think most famous of all, The Red Shoes. The Red Shoes is a movie about the excitement of art. It's that creative excitement that I think might be able to share with people more than 50
Now,
years younger.
Take one more step back and
Want to be a
stop.
bit more to your right, I think, don't you, Dora?
We get the shadow more. Okay, that
Isn't that better?
yeah, it is. Okay, now that's where you're gonna pause. So let's mark that spot.
Just keep this a bit wide, like that. And then you go right off.
Sign him up.
Why don't we shoot it?
Yes.
Isn't that better? Cut!
24.
Okay. That was
What I liked about the books was the fact that it's a big,
just say that on
legendary,
take two,
spectacular
maybe
subject.
quicker.
Good morals, lots of adventure, dragons, for whom I have a great weakness. I'm very fond of dragons. I thought that something marvelous could be done with that. And so when we had to find a subject to make a film about, I thought it would be interesting to make a sequence from a possible big film. We had 4 different versions, roughly 10 minutes each, what you might call potted versions of the original Earthsea story. The one which everybody voted for was the one which shows Ged, the hero of this story, the magician, coming into the tombs and the labyrinth of Atuan, looking for the half of the ring which has been lost, nearly dying in the quest, and then he's rescued by the little high priestess, who's a kind of Dalai Lama character. You know, she's doesn't know where she's come from. She's been taken from the cradle and brought up as the priestess. And she of course, falls first fascinated and then probably is falling in love with Ged. Through her, he is saved, and through him, she is saved from the tombs. The young girl, because she has this power of concentration, I think she's very effective in the part. An enormous lot, you know, of working in films is concentration. A lot of stage actors never realize that. I say you're not giving enough in a close-up. Well, I'm giving all I've got. No, you're not. You've got a lot more, you know. You can concentrate a lot more. Yeah. You'd be surprised at the difference. Yeah. Sometimes I've printed 2 takes just to show them the difference between when they were really concentrating and when they thought they were. And it's a big difference. And of course, she, being a trained dancer, has this remarkable power of still looking straight, you know, straight into somebody's eye.
Jamie, the one out in front, dim it way down.
I don't want you to feel stuck in that position. I want you to be...
Okay.
Making a film anyway is so much a matter of cooperation and collaboration.
No, it's not it. It's on the rail. It's on the first
when a film really starts rolling, whether it's a small film unit like ours was of 18 people, or a big one which might have as much as 80 people on it, there's a feeling right through the whole unit, which is one of creative activity from everybody. That's what I like to get in a film, and I suppose that's one of the reasons why my films are sometimes very unusual. You're usually mixing realism with something else, and the very fact that you've got real streets and then you go inside into a house, obviously you're going to make the house look as real as possible, even though it's a set. But occasionally I noticed that some of the theatrical scenes, which I thought were pure theatre, looked extraordinarily real. So I began to realize it was a question of light as well as a question of texture. And so when I did a film of Bartók's Bluebeard's Castle, which is an opera for 2 people, Hein Heckroth, who was the designer, said to me, well, what do you want, Mickey? Are we going to build a house or that sort of thing? I said, no, I don't think so. I want 4 movable walls. And he said, well, you mean like screens? I said, yes, but bigger than normal screens and rough cast to look like walls. He said, okay, what else? And I said, oh, a few props and things, and then we can polyestyrene, we can carve out statues and figures and stick it up to make it Bluebeard's Castle. That's what gave me the same idea with our little film here. So long as you've got some good art students, I think we can manage it. And although you felt that it was dark, there was always room to see that it was dark. There was always a certain amount of detail in the darkness. Quite often, if you have the right kind of sound, then the most puzzling and mysterious shot becomes clear. The feeling of the labyrinth, which is partly there already through the lighting, but with the added echoes coming back and clang of distant doors and the sound of the wind, and I think using electricity electronic winds and sound of women chanting, all of it's really disembodied. None of it is real.
And we see her.
And then we see her in the labyrinth.
That's right. And
Yeah.
she's starting to move through the labyrinth toward him. And these sounds would come
That's
up
rather good, isn't it?
as he starts to appear. And I haven't done the timing on it yet, so I don't know, but my idea was that
But it's the right kind of sounds for the labyrinth with the wind rushing through
Right.
it.
In some cases, a scene we liked very much, we dropped half of it because we found it better to cut from a particular word in the dialogue to the next image. All the time we were trying to get people to pick up the cues quickly in the dialogue. Amateur actors always think they can get over some significant pause or some significant piece of action instead of answering the other actor quickly. So quite often in the editing we've had to do that, do it for the actor. Some of the cuts have been just a few frames, and others have been dozens of feet. This, what we call taking out the slack, is absolutely necessary before you get to the final version.
You've got it already very well cut, the execution scene, up to the point where her head's about to be cut off. You've got that beautifully done already. So you have to be very careful where you put in another shot of Get, and it can't be at the wrong place. Now, you can't build up a suspense to the audience, is she going to get her head cut off, and then cut to suddenly transfer the suspense of the audience to Ged.
Well, I think we can, at least for a moment, because then you'll...
No, I don't think you can.
If you pull
I think you have to see him earlier, before the final suspense.
During the procession. Well,
after she's appeared.
Right. And before the drumming stops.
In other words, she's there in the long shot, she's approaching in the close shot, Ged sees her, then she kneels. You see what I mean?
We've all learned a lot from it, and probably I've learned as much as anybody else, or even more. One thing I have learned is that certainly the subject will require a lot of humor. That would be the first thing I would think of, because adventure there is already, action there is already, there's a fine theme and a fine moral. I think as a film it would lack a bit of humor. We'd have to find some way to do that. And we should certainly do our best to see if we can get the rights from Miss Le Guin and her agents to the Earthsea trilogy, and if we do, that will be my next production, because it's a big production to prepare, and the odds are on probably preparing it and finishing it on the coast, and that's about all, except that I'm working on my autobiography. And thanks to Dartmouth, I really got it going now. Again, it really is thanks to Dartmouth, because I several times tried to start it and gone 30, 40, in some cases 45,000 words. And I didn't like it. But when I came here, I began to think, well, here I am at the end of my career, and in a strange semi-academic sort of job amongst a lot of young people and interesting people. And I thought, well, it couldn't be a better place to start the story of my life, which has been going on for so long and which has been so much bound up with the cinema from the time when movies were silent right through to today, long before there was radio, long before there was television. I was still in picture business. And today, to look back on that and somehow, I hope, get it down on paper. That really might be more worthwhile doing than any of the other things I've mentioned.